So over this past month, as we've taken a deep dive into the 23rd Psalm, we've discovered that the Lord is our shepherd. So if the Lord is our shepherd, if he's the shepherd, what does that make us? We are sheep. That's exactly right. We are sheep. And the Bible tells us that we are a lot like sheep. We know that sheep have a very poor sense of direction. As the song says, they're prone to wander. They get lost very easily. And as we've studied, I've come to realize that I have more in common with sheep than I really wish I did. You know, sheep, when they're surprised, they get startled very easily. I know that's not cool, but I have to say, when I am surprised, when I'm startled, I rarely act with calm. But I have to say, I come by it very honestly. My mom, she had a very clear rule. When I was growing up, once I started driving, I had a curfew. My curfew, all the way until I went to college students, was midnight, which in my dad's view was 11:59 and 59 seconds. So if I showed up at midnight, I was actually late. When I first started driving, my mom would wait up for me, but then after she trusted me a little bit more, she would want me to come and wake her up when I got home, just to prove that I got home in time, but also that I was safe. But the deal about my mom is that anytime she's asleep and you wake her up, she overreacts. She is not calm at all. And so it would be curfew time. I would be creeping in, and usually it was 11:59 and 59 seconds. And I would go to my mom, and she would be sound asleep, and I would just so quietly, so gently go, "Mom." And she would go, just like that. She was loud and big motions. And then she couldn't go back to sleep again. And I'd go, "Mom, just trust me, it's gonna be okay." No, I'll be fine next time. And every time, I guarantee you, I'm not exaggerating, that happened hundreds of times in my life. And I have to say, I think I inherited her gift. Some of you will remember just 1 week ago, 2:38 a.m. Sunday morning, there was that loud thunderclap, lightning, boom, storm on top of us. And instead of me just going, it's raining outside, I found myself, It's embarrassing. You know, it's one thing to get startled when we're surprised, but it's a whole nother thing when we can't face the storms that we experience in life, right? Now, I will give it up. You can surprise me and I will jump. But in life, like you, I want to be courageous. Don't you want to be courageous? Don't you want to be courageous in the storms of life? Don't you want to be able to face whatever may come your way? Because that is life. The 23rd Psalm, verse 4, gives us such an incredible picture for all of us today, because this is exactly what we need. This is exactly what our world needs now. As we look at verse 4, we are going to break it down phrase by phrase. Let's begin. It says, even though. Will you say even though? Will you say even though? Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. Is that incredible? What is David saying, led by the Holy Spirit? He's saying courageous faith is possible. It's actually possible to have courageous faith in this fearful world. In this world filled with anxiety, with bad news after bad news. Instead of caving in, instead of giving in to fear, we can have courageous faith. Because what does fear do? Fear limits us, doesn't it? Fear holds us back. Fear keeps us from experiencing all that God has for us. So many of us, man, we struggle with fear. But what David is saying is, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, he picks a place that represents deep darkness. He says, even when I face the worst thing I could possibly face in life, he says, I fear no evil. I don't have to fear. I don't have to cave into fear. And he uses this example, the valley of the shadow of death, because it was an actual location that the listeners would have understood to this psalm. You see, the shepherd And David had been a shepherd. That was how he was trained in leadership before he became a warrior and he became a king. David had experienced this. The sheep would graze in the lowlands in the summer, but then as soon as those green pastures began to run out, they would then go up to the highlands where there would be more pastures that they could graze on, but they had to go through the valley. And there was a location that's just outside of Jerusalem. It's on the way from Jericho to Jerusalem. It's called the Wadi Kelt. This is an example of what it looks like. David picked this because you can see the inherent danger, can't you? Steep cliffs, jagged, all kind of places where both predators, animals could hide, but also robbers could hide. And these areas, they were prone to flash floods. So you could be hiking along and not have any idea, but if a storm was coming from the higher mountains elevation, water would come running down. David says, even though I walk through such an incredibly dangerous place like this, I fear no evil. I mean, and he even takes it to the outer edge. He says, the valley of death, the finality of death. He says, even if that's what I'm facing, he said, I don't have to be afraid. Courageous faith is possible. You can step out of your comfort zone, students, this week and make friendships that you never imagined you would have. See, always the temptation is fear is to pull us back, is to what? Is to keep us in our comfort zone, keep us in our safe space. But instead, we can have courageous faith. I'm inspired by courageous people. Aren't you inspired by courageous people? I love to see people who demonstrate courage. I was thinking about one of my heroes today. He was a man who went and served in World War II. He was in the Navy because he wanted to serve his country, demonstrated courage on the battlefield. But then afterwards, he came to know Jesus Christ and began to grow in him. And he had such courage about doing God's will. That was so important to him, was to follow the Lord. He wanted to do the right thing. It's no surprise that when his wife was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, that he stuck so close to her. He loved her so incredibly well through all of that. And even when he himself was facing death, Tanya and I had an opportunity to visit with him. He was still sharing and encouraging, still challenging us to invest in people. He was courageous under fire. Why? Because he got it. Courageous faith is possible. We don't have to live a life of fear. Tim Keller says it this way. He says, courage isn't just facing physical death or facing physical danger. The essence of courage is facing your heart's greatest nightmare and saying, I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to do the unselfish thing no matter what. And Tim Keller, some of you know, author, pastor, he's graduated. He went to heaven within the last few weeks. And he had such a courageous life. And he went to heaven in such a courageous way because he got it. Do you get it today? I'm going to ask you to do something. In your mind and in your heart, I want you to name your valley today. What valley are you walking through today? I want you to name it in your heart and your mind. Even though I walk through the valley of chronic illness, I fear no evil. Even though I walk through the valley of financial difficulty, I fear no evil. Even though I walk through the valley of relational brokenness, I fear no evil. You name it, you pick it. Even though I fear rejection, even though I fear whatever it may be, you can trust God in it. Courageous faith is possible. And when we see people walk out courageous faith, isn't it inspiring? We want to follow. We want to live what they understand. And then David gives us the source. What is the source of this incredible, courageous faith? Look at the next phrase. For you are with me. So simple. For God is with us. Courageous faith is found in the presence of the Savior. David is saying, I fear no evil. You know why I fear no evil? Because I know whom I'm with, but more importantly, I know who is with me. Because this is what fear, this is a pretty solid definition of fear. Fear is imagining the pain and the shame of the valley without the shepherd in it. Does that make sense? Fear is imagining the pain and the shame of the valley without the shepherd in it. That's what happens. We begin to speculate what's going to happen to me. We begin to talk and imagine the pain that we're going to go through or the shame because of our failures, and we act as if we're alone. But I have to tell you, if you are in Jesus Christ today, if you have a relationship with him, that he is with you. He promises to be with you forever. Jesus has come to be with us by his grace, by his goodness. When you begin to understand the power of the reality that he is with you, it changes everything. It changes absolutely everything for you. Go back to that storm last Sunday morning, early. It may have happened in your home. I know it happened in homes all over the city where the lightning began to flash, the thunder began to boom, and the children began to show up in the bedroom. Maybe for some of you, I know of a family that have 3 children, and independently, all 3 kids within a few minutes came in. Mom, Dad, can I sleep in your room? And at that point, I don't care how hard you hold the line, all bets are off. You just want to go back to sleep, right? And so they all grabbed a spot on the floor and they were out. They went back to bed because they were in the presence of their parents. Courageous faith is found in the presence of the shepherd. Do you know the shepherd? Name your valley. Name your valley. What is the valley that you're going through right now? Or what is the valley that you are afraid of? Name it and then say to the good shepherd, Lord, I put it in your hands because you are with me. And we spend a lot of time praying. We spend a lot of time talking about prayer. But do you really stop and go, Lord, as I'm praying right now, I know you're with me. As I'm in this spot of fear right now, Lord, I know that you are with me. Courageous faith, it's possible. And courageous faith is found in the presence of the shepherd. And let's look at that last phrase. Because your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Courageous faith is fueled by the comfort of the shepherd. God has given the shepherd this incredible gift of comforting, of caring for us. And he gives us some equipment. That's some equipment that we can think about, that we can visualize and we can understand. He says 2 things. He says that he has, the Lord, our shepherd, has a rod and has a staff. Now, when you think about this rod, some of them were a little bit longer than this, but you have to realize what an incredible weapon it is. First of all, we know that David, before he battled Goliath, King Saul was questioning him and saying, are you crazy? Why are you doing this? And David is saying, I've even killed a lion or a bear. How? Probably with a rod. Because you can just trust me, when you create a little bit of momentum, this thing delivers quite a punch. It was used for defense. It was used to ward off the enemy. So if any coyotes, anything would come after the sheep, the shepherd would use the rod. It's a rod of protection. He would also use the rod that if his sheep were straying and they were going off toward the edge of the pasture, just following the grass along, as we said, they get lost real easy. The shepherd was skilled enough that he could throw the rod, that he would put it in the general direction, not to hit the sheep, but to land close, get the sheep's attention, and the sheep would wander back. So it was for protection, and it was also for correction. But the other thing the shepherd did with the rod is they would count. Remember, at the end of the day, the shepherd would always count the sheep and make sure he had every single one of them. And so he would just, as the sheep passed by, he would count. This would be his counting tool. So if he reached the end of his count and he was missing a sheep, then suddenly the rod became an alarm that said, you're missing one. You've got to go and look. Our good shepherd has a rod of protection over us. But also our good shepherd has a staff. Now the staff had a different purpose. While this is protective and this is corrective, the staff so often was used to give strength to the sheep when the sheep was weak. If the sheep stumbled, the shepherd could just gently grab a hold with the crook of the staff and pull the sheep up. If the sheep was starting to stray, the shepherd could just reach out, could just give a little correction, pull it in. And sometimes the shepherd would walk along just as a sign of affection and just put the staff on the sheep's back and just walk along with it so that the sheep knew that it was part of the shepherd's flock, that the shepherd valued the sheep. Courageous faith, it's possible today. It's possible you can live a life that's not limited by fear because it's found in the presence of the shepherd, the amazing, incredible shepherd. And he uses his rod and his staff to comfort us, to keep us in the flock, to keep us growing. What is the rod and staff? How do we see the shepherd living and moving today? What is it that brings correction to our lives? What is it that brings protection to our lives? It's God's word. It's his word. The Bible says that God's word is sharper than any two-edged sword. It cuts away the lies. It cuts away the falsehoods. It cuts away the sinful attitudes that we have and gets down to the heart. It protects us. It defends us. But then also we've been given this incredible gift. Jesus, when he ascended to heaven, the Holy Spirit came. And when you come to know Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit lives within you. Our bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit. So the Lord is always with us in his powerful presence to lead us, to guide us. And so how do we grow? We grow in knowledge of him, in knowledge of his word, in knowledge of his presence as we seek to pray. Now, the students are going to have an amazing opportunity this week on Beach Retreat, but it's also for you guys. You're going to do something called Silent Sounds. It's a quiet time where you get quiet before the Lord with your Bible, with your notebook, and in the most amazing place, you sit out on the beach and you see God's amazing, beautiful creation as you look out into the water. It's incredible. They'll do it in the morning and they'll do it in the evening. Now, when you first start, you may think, man, this is a long time. But by the end of the week, you will consider it, as so many students have, this is my favorite time of the beach retreat because you have a chance to get quiet, no phones, no distractions, just with the Lord. Now, it does surprise, I have to say, the people that are there, the guests that stay at the same places that we're at, because they don't understand. They know a retreat's going on and they see hundreds of students, but they don't really understand when they see a bunch of kids spread out across the beach. And they'll speculate, hey, what's going on? But I have to say, my favorite thing that I've ever heard is a man walked up to me while we're spread out doing Silent Sounds. He can only see us from the behind up on his balcony. He came up to me and he said, "Is this an artists' convention?" And I said, "Artists? What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, I see all these students sitting here sketching. They're just sketching." And I said, "Well, actually, we're reading our Bibles and praying." And he was like, "Oh, okay. Looked like sketching to me." It's going to be incredible. We can grow, all of us, in the knowledge of God, in his presence, to be reminded of his power as we spend time with him. That's the reality of growing in him. His rod and his staff, they comfort us. Let's go back to the verse one more time. There's one more word, though, I haven't hit on. Even though I walk through. Would you say through? Would you say through? It says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Notice he didn't use the preposition to. He didn't say, even though I walk to the valley of the shadow of death, like this is a dead end, this is a place I'm stuck. We walk through and the Lord is with us. We walk through, we don't just walk to and get stuck. So if you are in a valley right now, you name your valley and it feels so hard right now and you feel like you're stuck in the valley, the Lord is walking through the valley with you and he's teaching you as he's walking in and through the valley. It's through and it's not to. But you have to understand God's power and his goodness, that he is with you in it. Donald Gray Barnhouse experienced the tragic loss of his wife when his children were still young. And he was trying to help them understand the loss and what God was doing. And they were riding in a car one day, and a big truck passed by them. And as the truck went by, he noticed a shadow was cast on them from the truck. And so he just took advantage of the opportunity, and he said to his children, he said, "You see that truck that just passed by?" He said, "If you had your choice, would you want to be hit by the truck or the shadow of the truck?" And they said, "Dad, come on, we want to be hit by the shadow of the truck. It can't hurt us." And he said, "Well, listen to this." He said, Jesus Christ, for us on the cross, was hit by the truck. Jesus took the full blunt on our behalf. He was struck for us. But then Jesus Christ, he defeated death. And because he defeated death, because what he did, he went first for us. Now we don't experience death forever. Instead, we experience the shadow of death. And what can the shadow do to us? Nothing. It can't harm us at all. He said that's what happened to Mom. Jesus Christ took the blow for her. And because of that, we know that Mom is with Jesus right now. Just the shadow of death has passed over her, and it's caused her no harm. See, the reality is this. Courageous faith is possible when we know the shepherd, because the shepherd is with us. Courageous faith is possible because we grow in knowledge of him by his rod, by his staff, by his word, and by his spirit. But we can know and we can live in courageous faith because Jesus Christ went to the cross for us so that now we can go through the valley with him. Do you know him? If you know him, do you trust him? Do you trust him? Name your valley. Know that he is with you in the valley, and know that he will use the valley to help you grow. And when we are not held back by our fear, the opportunities, the joy set before us, it is amazing. Trust him in the valley because he is with you.